believe it's 12 o'clock. Let me hand over to Laura and Kelly to kick off the session. Thank you very much.
Hello, hello, everybody. Lovely to see you. I can see all your names flooding in. This is so exciting. Okay, so yeah, first one of 2024. I nearly said 2025 there. I've lost a whole year. We've only just started it. Yeah, so first session of 2024, and I think we've got a belter for you. Is that a Scottish term? Kelly, you usually know if we've come out with something
I don't know. I
purely
do say
Scottish.
that, but I don't know if other
Yeah.
people say that.
Yeah, it's a belter. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it actually came from a suggestion by one of the community. They had noticed that there was an increase in students and staff who were coming along and asking for support with ADHD. So we thought, well, let's explore that. Let's do a clinic, and we are super privileged. I'm going to use the word privileged to have Esther come along and speak with us today. I could just gush about Esther. Esther's done some coaching with me and all that kind of stuff, but I'm not going to do that because sometimes that's a bit cringe, and that's what I do. But I will let Esther introduce herself. But she's a fabulous expert on this subject. And Esther, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Laura. Thank you. And I could equally gush about you. So, you know, the feeling's mutual. Likewise, just colleagues on the call today. So, hi, everybody. It's very nice to see you. I can see all your names, at least. I can see a few faces. Laura said, hey, come along and do something about ADHD. So I said, well, why don't we do an Ask Me Anything? Which is a different way of approaching things. You may have seen Ask Me Anythings on Reddit, for example, or maybe some other social media platforms where people ask the questions and then the other person, in this case verbally, will try and share their experiences. I'm going to try and share my experiences with you and share any advice that I can give you. But also equally, if anyone has advice to share in the chat pane, please do that as well. I'm not quite sure how many people in the room, but we've got quite a few, I think, already. So I think perhaps the chat pane might be the best place to share if we have some really good nuggets and some really good advice and tips and tricks. So while you're thinking up your questions for Ask Me Anything, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I'm 56 and I was diagnosed 3 years ago when I was 53. Like many people, my son was diagnosed before me. And it wasn't until I had the time to be still in my office during the pandemic that I realized I also have ADHD, partly because of this in front of a Zoom camera all day like this, drinking about 3 pints of water during one meeting, you know, fidgeting, moving. I'm very hyperactive physically, but a lot of people aren't. Some people are hyperactive in their heads, some people are hyperactive in their physicality. So I got a diagnosis, and I was on meds for a while, but now I'm not on meds anymore for the moment because of it's too expensive and there's a shortage, and lots of things are happening around meds for people at the moment. I thought I would like to be an ADHD coach because I saw somebody in a forum say, hey, does anyone know a good ADHD coach? So I hyper-focused on discovering more about ADHD and what is ADHD coaching. And then I did a level 5 ILM in coaching and mentoring and turned that into ADHD coaching. What I felt was working for my clients as I started to get more and more experience. And then I realized that in the UK, there is no training for ADHD coaches. It's a very, very, very early days for the profession. So I wrote a course and I now deliver the UK's first ever accredited ADHD coach training, which is good for people who are just started out in their journey for coaching, or if they're already coaches and they want to add that qualification to their CV. So ADHD coaching became a thing. I'm now embarking on doing some stuff around supervising coaches as well, because that also doesn't exist in the UK either. So you can see that I've kind of really been trying to consolidate, network, bring people together to support people with ADHD, because there's very little in terms of support in the UK for people diagnosed or undiagnosed. Mostly the National Health Service provides meds if you can get them and if you can get an appointment and if you can get a diagnosis. Other than that, we're pretty much on our own. So I think I saw a question come through a moment ago. Would staff with ADHD have more problems adjusting to an open office? That is such a good question. Some people with ADHD, before I say anything else, I'm going to say this. If you've met one person with ADHD, you've met one person with ADHD. Everybody's different. What works for one person will not work for another. So it's hard to generalize, but I can give you some kind of overarching advice. My first overarching advice would be ask them, obviously. It may or may not help them to have people around them. It might help with accountability because a lot of people with ADHD like to work with someone else. However, if you're in a very noisy, distracting environment, that could be way too much. So an open office could be a lovely, quiet open office like the one out here in front of me now, or it could be a super busy, distracting, kind of overwhelming environment. So it really depends on the office. What other problems are they likely to have in the workplace? Working on projects or working with students? That is a massive question. I could spend the next hour sharing with you the kinds of issues that people will have. But if you remember that ADHD, the 3 areas that people struggle with in ADHD is around focus. So obviously we can have not enough focus, a lot of people don't realize that we can have far too much focus. So we can be far focused on things that we're really interested in, but we can also be not focused on things that we're not interested in or not challenged by, or that are mundane and boring. So we have to really think about the kinds of work that we're doing and the challenges it might present in terms of too much or too little focus. If we're spending too much time focusing on one thing, we may be neglecting something else. So time management, focus management, and prioritization are really important for us. The second thing, I use the 3 F's model because it helps people who don't know too much about ADHD to remember what's going on in our brains. So we've got focus, we've got function. So if you think about executive function, do you have issues with organizing yourself? Do you lose stuff? Do you miss meetings, deadlines, important things? Do you double book yourself? Is your diary a bit of a kind of scary place to go? Are there things around being late for things or being early for things? So kind of time management is a big one as well in terms of function. And then the third one that I think would be really helpful for you to remember, and often isn't mentioned, is feelings. People with ADHD struggle with emotional dysregulation and rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And so we can have very much highs and lows in our emotions. Not everybody, I don't personally have that, but a lot of people do. And we can also take criticism and rejection very, very hard. It's like very much a physical reaction. And so our emotions very much impact on us in our workplace. Of course they do. You don't turn into a robot the minute you walk through the office door. So it's very much thinking about how somebody might be struggling with their emotions in the workplace. For example, by feeling overwhelmed, or by feeling shame because they're not managing, or by feeling that they're struggling and that cycle of anxiety and struggling, and maybe being too embarrassed to say anything. So I think you asked the kind of small question there, which is what problems are you likely to have in the workplace? That's kind of a vast kind of overview of the kinds of issues that people can have in the workplace. What support should institutions put in place for staff? There's a lot. I could share some ideas with you afterwards, but I would just in a very quick nutshell, I would say something like we have here at JISC neurodiversity network for people to support each other, opportunities for people to share, things like this, workshops, drop-ins for people to be able to kind of get together and understand each other's struggles and how other people might have been able to manage those struggles. And at an institutional level, very much a culture change and an acceptance and an embracing of neurodiversity in the workplace, and actively encouraging people to come into the workplace. And when I say neurodiversity, that includes neurotypical people as well, because that is the diversity. So welcoming everyone to come into the workplace and being incredibly kind of supportive and understanding and inclusive in our practices. I can see that there are 27 new messages here. So I'm just going to zoom through, unless anyone wants to pick questions out. Oh, I've got to the first one, I think. How do I work well with a colleague who triggers my RSD and their communication style? If it's possible to have a conversation with the person, I would say that would be a good starting point. I like to think that colleagues would be up for going on things like awareness raising sessions. Certainly, I think that it's really helpful to have training within an organization, support staff to understand more about what ADHD is and other forms of neurodiversity as well, so that colleagues are aware that there's a potential issue that could arise. Now, how far you want to disclose your condition is another thing, is another matter, whether you want to tell everybody or just a few people or nobody. So communication, you said the word communication style, your communication and their communication, maybe it's worth just having a conversation about, not necessarily in terms of neurodiversity, but generally our communication styles are different. So I think we could probably go into a bit more detail about that one, but that would be my general thoughts when I hear that question.
Lovely. I've got a question. I've been scanning them. So Lizzie has asked, can you tell us about how you communicated your diagnosis with colleagues and how it was received?
That is such a good question. So it's not going to be the same for everyone. And don't forget, I'm an old person. So I was 53 when I got my diagnosis, and I was sort of excited about it because it explains so much about the way that my life has been, and how it is now. And I was almost like, I just told everyone I knew almost. And I remember the very first time I told my colleagues that I had a diagnosis. I was the first time I said it out loud in front of colleagues I didn't know very well. I did nearly cry. It is an emotional thing. So I think my approach was, generally speaking, to tell one person at a time because it's very overwhelming. So I told my boss, and then I told the people I work with very, very closely, some of whom were completely unsurprised, of course. And then I just kind of gradually, a little step at a time, like drawing flour into a pancake mix. I just started in the middle and then gradually worked my way out until now the whole world knows about. But then again, I am within the company coaching and promoting, and I'm on the neurodiversity network and so on. So it's very much become my vocation, you could almost say, another new vocation, as people do change vocations through life. So I hope that helps. One step at a time, what you feel comfortable with, settle into that, then the next step, until eventually you have the circle of people around you who you want to know. That would be my answer.
Sounds good. Next question. What does ADHD coaching involve or look like, please? What areas of life are covered?
Okay, that's a good question. And it really covers almost any area of life because coaching is all about the client. Now, there are different kinds of coaching, career coaching, coaching at work, coaching that's paid for by your organization, coaching that you undertake yourself in your personal life. ADHD coaching can do any of those things through the lens of this kind of neurodiversity and this particular neurodivergent condition. So every client's different. A person might come to you with the aim of having peace in their life, or they might come to you with the aim of tidying up their dining room. It really, really depends on the client. But what my coaching and the coaching that I train people with has in common is we're not trying to change people's behaviors. We're not trying to make them fit into society, and we're not trying to get them to change who they are. And we're not trying to damp down anything, which sometimes people are worried about. We're not trying to fit square pegs in round holes. What my coaching does is it helps people identify their strengths. Many people with ADHD, through a combination of RSD and long-term childhood trauma and a general feeling of being rubbish at everything, often come to coaching with very low self-esteem, and they're telling themselves some very negative messages about themselves. So what we try to do is we try to identify strengths. We try to help people realize all the things that they have done, all the things that they can do, think about their goals, understand how to overcome their barriers and challenges, reframe some negative self-thinking and self-beliefs, and build their resilience. So that's what I think coaching is all about. But it could be to do with the dining room, or it could be to do with finding peace. It could be to changing their job, it could be of getting on better with their colleagues. There are a raft of actual content that people can come to coaching with. I hope that describes it.
Sounds good. Next question is from Mike. It is claimed that modern social media is reducing people's ability to focus or concentrate. The kids of social media leaders aren't allowed by their parents to use mobile devices. So does this affect people with ADHD differently?
It almost speaks to us in a way. We know that ADHD is hereditary. I don't use the word genetic because I don't understand enough about genetics to say that, but we know it's hereditary. We know it runs in families. We know neurodiversity runs in families. So there are some spurious and unfounded claims pootling around on social media around things like, TikTok causes ADHD. No. And the way that we consume media does not exacerbate ADHD or make it worse. It can be quite good for us to be able to consume media in bite-sized chunks, but it's an absolute misconception that everybody with ADHD can only concentrate for 5 seconds. You have to remember back to what I said at the beginning, our hyperfocus is there too. And if it's interesting, engaging, and we want to do it, we can focus on, we can read 10,000 novels. It's a fallacy that we don't read books. Lots of people read books, lots of people don't read books. Lots of people read a lot of kind of text, academic stuff. That's fine. Some people don't. It doesn't suit the way that they consume media and information. So it's better, really, because we have a lot more choice about the way we consume media and information now that we didn't have before. And a lot of people will have failed school or felt they failed school, or really school failed them because it wasn't presenting them with data in a way that they could consume and understand and engage with. So I think I answered that question.
Yeah,
I think things are better now. But it's not social media. I don't know if social media is causing people's attention spans generally across the whole population to get shorter. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Next one. Okay, Laura has written something, so I'm just going to read it out because there's a question within it. I have been constantly raising awareness, being open about my diagnosis and open to students and staff approaching me about any questions. I have felt it was a very slow uptake, but it's been gaining traction and mostly a positive experience. But how do you tackle people who respond dismissively with everyone has ADHD or everyone struggles with that?
I know, and it's quite strange, really, because obviously I've been doing this for about 3 years now, and I don't know. There are probably I know there are people in the room who have ADHD, and I don't know about you, but you have a bit of an ADHD dar, where you kind of know if somebody has, or at least all the traits are there, and you can kind of recognize, especially if they've got physical hyperactivity. But there's a lot of giveaways and a lot of clues that somebody does have ADHD. And I do often, when somebody is like, everyone does that. And then I often think to myself, if you do that, then maybe you have it too. And it's not always the case, obviously. But when you know someone quite well, and then you're talking about, procrastination, for example, or starting one task and then moving on to another task and then moving on to another one, and eventually 3 hours later looping back to the first task. And then the person says, "Oh yeah, I do that too," and you're like, "I know, I kind of can see that you've got the traits, but I don't want to say to them, oh, you better go and get yourself checked out," because belief is the kind of key to this. Some people still don't really believe it exists, even though we've got the brain scans to show that there are neurological differences in the brain. An ADHD brain will light up differently. The neural networks will light up differently to a neurotypical brain. we've got generations of evidence in terms of behavior, and the way that people's lives go and the things that people struggle with, and we've still got this kind of doubt out there, and that leads to stigma, and it leads to shame. And the word shame comes up over and over again, really, when we are it's almost like it would be a shameful or a stigmatizing thing for me to admit that this is a real thing and that possibly I might also have it. So that's kind of what we're dealing with there. So we will, as a community, as an ADHD community, we will be dismissed. We will be brushed off. People will not believe that it's real. People will think it's an excuse for being lazy. And those are some of the reasons why we are so hard on ourselves, is because those societal norms, that's what people say about us. We have to be strong. We have to do things like this. We have to share what's our experiences with all the neurodiversity of our networks and our communities and our other communities and our intersectional communities as well. So it's hard. It's really, really hard.
I
didn't really answer that, did I?
No, you did. You totally did. You totally did. And something that I thought really helped me was I saw a guy on social media talking about his ADHD, and he was addressing the topic of but everybody's a little ADHD, and he said, yeah, and excuse the language, but he said everybody goes to the toilet, but if you were going to the toilet 150 times a day, you would go and get checked out. And that's it. It's like, yeah, it's how much and how often and how severe does it affect you that, yeah, we'll all do forget our keys, but are you like leaving your keys in your front door every day? My neighbours handed me my keys a couple of times, and I was just like, oh, and like you say, the shame and the embarrassment, and you don't want to go, I have ADHD, that's why I did that. But they know that I can't come out my house and get in my car in one go. They see me do it. They see me going back in and out 4 times to get all the stuff I've forgotten. So yeah, it's difficult. But yeah.
And if you're looking at it from a kind of screening diagnosis perspective, you have a list of criteria that you have to tick to get a diagnosis. Brain scans are too expensive, therefore we have bits of paper with checkboxes on them. Everybody might tick 1 or 2 of them, but if you've got ADHD, you tick nearly all of them, and that's the difference.
Okay, next question. We have Laura, a different Laura. Wait a minute.
Can I go back to a question?
Yeah,
Can I go
sure.
back to a question? Because the person, let me see, Lizzie said how I communicated it with my colleagues, but I didn't say how it was received. And that was an important part of the question, I think, because every single one of my colleagues said, what can I do to help you? Which is crazy, really, because I've been masking and keeping it under wraps and not realizing I had it for 53 years. So, well, I couldn't really offer any suggestions about anything that anyone could do to help me. But it's become apparent how we can help each other since those days. So thank you, Laura. I just wanted to acknowledge that.
It totally, yeah, I think that quite often people who have been diagnosed or are considering diagnosis, when you're asked that question of, well, how can I help? Part of you just goes, I don't know. I've been struggling with this for like so long. If I knew what helped, I probably wouldn't be in this situation. As in, yeah, so that's a difficult one too. Okay, Shannon, I think I've lost the other Laura's question, so I will try and find that. If you don't have a formal diagnosis, but are highly confident you have ADHD or AUD, I can't read that out.
ADHD.
Yeah. How can you navigate this in a work environment and understand what you may need in terms of support, especially when it's emotional dysregulation and RSD is a major issue?
That's such a good question, because we need to change how we prioritize diagnosis, I think, in the workplace. So many people are self-diagnosed with neurodivergent conditions, And do we really need people to have a official diagnosis to be able to make our workplaces inclusive? I don't think we do. I think that if someone identifies as ADHD, that sounds a bit wrong, but you know what I mean by that. If someone identifies as having ADHD, I don't think they should need to wave a piece of paper for that workplace to be inclusive. And most neurodivergent people, this is my understanding, most neurodivergent people have more than one condition. So I've got undiagnosed dyscalculia. Lots of people have autism and ADHD. We're finding as we go through, as diagnoses processes start to change, we're finding more and more people who can be screened for both at the same time, finding more people with ADHD, as we're calling it, autism and ADHD. So and people are waiting 5, I've even heard of 10 years on an NHS waiting list to be diagnosed. If we relied on diagnosis as being integral to our workplace practices, I think we'd be doing a massive disservice to people. So I've forgotten what the original question was, Laura. Can you just remind me?
I can. How can you navigate not having a diagnosis, but you're pretty confident? How can you navigate that in a work environment to understand
so I
what
think
you could ask for, I suppose?
So if you're, yes, because if people in a working environment who have a diagnosis can get access to work, and they can get all sorts of various different coaching and virtual assistants and various things to help them in the workplace, and some other stuff as well, I think. If you're undiagnosed, obviously you're going to be relying on a bit like the other person was mentioning about communicating with colleagues, sharing, having the confidence to be able to share with colleagues that you feel that you have this condition, and for colleagues to be understanding and inclusive in the way that we'll work together so that it's not an issue. But I don't know what to advise in terms of you as an individual person, apart from, do you trust your colleagues, and can you share with them how you feel about what you undoubtedly feel is your condition? I don't know if HR would be able to help, because we're trying to raise awareness of neurodiversity with HR professionals as well, for example, who are just as much in the dark as everybody else.
I'm just going to say at this point, thank you so much to everybody who's sharing in the chat. There's people putting in what they've diagnosed with, and or what they believe themselves to have. So that's amazing that you're all sharing in there. So thank you very much for that. Another question is, and people are answering things in the chat, so do keep an eye on that if you've asked a question, if we don't manage to get to it. There's a question here from John. For those who have an inkling that their neurodiversity could be ADHD, is there a trusted resource for people to self-diagnose?
That's a really good question. There are a few free screening diagnostic tools online. I don't know if any of my colleagues want to. Oh, I wrote a blog post about it. I put some. If you pop in the link to Barrett Coaching and Training blog posts, there's a blog post in there with a link to 3 or 4 screeners. There are a few things you can do. I mean, we're all equally as capable of diagnosing ourselves, I personally believe, as a psychiatrist. What do? We look at how were we as a child. Now, I'm not saying I was a high achiever, late crasher. A lot of women and girls, high achievers, and then crash at a certain point in life, going to university, having kids, those kinds of things can be the point at which they crash. Boys, I'm generalizing. Boys tend to be the one who is spotted in school, disruption, interrupting, can't settle, can't sit still, those kinds of things. But lots of girls have that too, don't get me wrong. So Laura, just guide me back to the question again.
It was, I just jumped out my own chat. 2 seconds. It was, is there a trusted source of going to a trusted resource? So the blog post would answer that. So
there's some screeners. There's thinking about how you were as a kid compared to how you are now. When I went for my screening, I was very clear with my psychiatrist that the criteria relate to how I was when I was a young person, not how I am now as a person who's learned to manage, to mask, to strategize, and to become what I think the world needs me to be. In other words, to fit in with society. So you can cover up your traits with layers and layers and layers of masking and management. So look at how you really are, not how you're managing now, because that's a front. And the other thing is to ask your friends and family, and go and talk to people with ADHD. Have one of those hilarious conversations where you find out you've got everything in common. You know, do your research, talk to people, go to things like this, join forums. So there's loads of social media forums. I mean, I really knew I had ADHD after I'd spent some time in the forums and people are sharing about all the struggles that they have and the tips and tricks they've had for managing them. That's where you find your tribe. That's where you find your people, and you go, yes, I fit. These are the people I need to be with because they get me and I get them. You will know. You'll know.
I had a random, well, it wasn't random, it was instigated because of getting a diagnosis, in terms of going to get the diagnosis with my mum. And she kind of talked to her about how I was when I was little. And like, she told me stories about how I was when I was little before. It wasn't like I didn't know things that I'd done when I was before. But when I asked them in a different way, like, did you ever think I struggled to pay attention? All these stories came out about me. And she was like, oh, you'd never sit still, and we'd be sitting reading you a story, and you'd be up walking around the room, and you would say, are you paying attention, Laura? And you'd be like, I'm listening, just you keep, I've got to do this though. And you'd be off doing others, all these stories. And I think she didn't tell me those stories because societal norms would say that your child won't sit still and they're just talking all the time and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was a big eye opener that all this stuff I used to do, so that
And
I was too
if
little to
you're
remember.
and if you live in a neurodivergent family, your neurodivergent family will go, well, this is normal.
Yes.
And then it's only when you go out and visit someone in another family you go, oh, actually, not everybody's like us.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, yeah, part of that was it because my mum said she would see other kids doing stuff and she was like, mine doesn't do that. Like, that's what she'd be thinking. Mine won't sit and listen to a story, or mine won't stop talking to me, or whatever. So yeah. Okay, next question. Oh, yes, my mum would say I was always away with the fairies. Yes. I've just seen that comment and resonated with me.
That's an interesting one, the away with the fairies thing, because not all people with ADHD are like intense, and some do the zoning out thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a sign that is not often acknowledged, and it's not often understood, that drifting away thing, because you're not kind of hyperactive and doing stuff, you're actually drifting away. It's still a sign, but it's just not one that not that many people know about it. Sorry, just wanted to tap into that for a second.
Yeah,
Zoning out,
absolutely.
really.
Yeah, and I think I think sometimes the look on your face, well, certainly the look on my face, people think that my head is empty when I zone out, but it's not. It's frantically doing 101 different things and making lists and trying to get me to remember stuff that is not about the present moment. But I'm pretty sure that I look like a complete space cadet just staring out a window or staring at a cup on the table or something like that. But yeah, my brain is going at a fair rate of knots.
It's worth mentioning that, isn't it? One of the big differences between, this is my understanding, because don't forget, I don't know what it's like to live inside a neurotypical brain, but my understanding is that inside a neurotypical brain, it's quite quiet and you have time to think and there's space in there, which is bizarre to me, because inside an ADHD brain, it's going at 100 miles an hour. You've got several conversations going on. You're probably having a conversation with yourself. You've got thoughts pinging around like inside a pinball machine. And it's very hard for us to understand the other's perspective in terms of what it feels like to be inside that person's head.
Okay, I'm just gonna. Just people saying they've been talking to others, and it's certainly been helpful finding their tribe. So yeah, that's resonating. Gizzy saying, yes, it's common masking and social bluffing history in us late diagnosis crowd, and very hard to unlearn some of those things that we've done. Some messages about misdiagnosis too. How did you find that? Did you find it difficult to navigate the diagnosis process? When
Not for me, but not for me, but I've met so many people who've been misdiagnosed, and so many people have been brushed off as well, especially women.
Yeah.
I don't know why, especially women, but maybe that's my circle, I don't know. But women who tend to go to the GP, some GPs are very dismissive, not all, but some GPs would rather treat your anxiety and depression with meds than get to the root cause of what's really going on. And I know people who have been misdiagnosed with bipolar. I can remember a GP trying to re-diagnose my son as bipolar because that was their special interest. I was like, no, he's definitely got ADHD. There are differences in the way that those two conditions present themselves. But anxiety and depression, insomnia, substance use, CPTS, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, or complex trauma or childhood trauma, as those three names interchangeable. All of those conditions can be masking or hiding what's really going on, or at least what originally was there at the base of it all. And also there are some physical conditions as well that are linked with ADHD, like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. A lot of people seem to struggle with their digestives, with their tummy. Joints and tummies seem to be a big thing in ADHD. Yeah. I've also, every time I talk for a little while and I can't remember what the question was. I'm so sorry. I hope I did answer that question.
You did. You absolutely did.
I have a memory of a goldfish. A lot of people really struggle with their memory, and some people, I'm not saying everyone does, but I have extremely poor long-term, middle-term, and short-term memory. So I can almost not get to the end of a sentence and I've already forgotten what was going on at the beginning. Or I can, this morning we were all in a hotel and I thought somebody should have been there, and then I forgot that they were in a totally different hotel, but I had only been with them the night before and then dropped them off at that hotel. It just goes. Things just go, and that can be a massive impact in the workplace.
Gizzy's saying the chat's jumping around. Yeah, I totally get it. I keep looking at a question and then going, I feel like I'm 4 questions back, but it's because you guys are doing so well at answering the questions and talking to each other. So don't stop doing that. It's totally fine.
Yes, keep going.
Yes, it's amazing. Okay, let me find another question. If anyone wants to take the mic and ask a question, please feel free to do so. I realise that it's me and Esther chatting, but I mean, Esther and I could chat all day. So, I mean, we're here, we'll be way past the hour. So feel free to jump in.
There's a good one here about RSD, but if you want to take the mic first, and then we can go back to the one about RSD.
Yeah, I'm going to put it in the chat, but I mean, people talk a lot about bringing your authentic self to work, and you hear it all the time and saying, you get a much better workplace. I mean, is that really possible? I mean, if everybody brought their authentic self to work, would it work?
It's very interesting you should say that, Mike, because I was having a conversation about this last night with some of my colleagues, and I was saying that when I was in my early 20s, I was like masking the hell out of it. And if I made a mistake, I was absolutely heartbroken and I wouldn't really speak up. I know you wouldn't hardly believe it to see me now. And now I'm in my 50s and I'm more confident and I can just say what I think, and my brain and the way that I work and my experience and everything about me is valued. And part of me is my ADHD. And I'm not saying people value my ADHD, but they value me as a person. So I think authenticity comes with things like confidence and experience and being nurtured in your workplace. I don't think you can just suddenly be authentic. It's a whole combination of a whole lot of different factors. And actually, you might have a very authentic mask and you might think to yourself, I don't want to be open and vulnerable in my workplace because I haven't got the trust and I haven't got the relationships to be able to enable me to do that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. We've all got our professional personas. We've all got our kind of, we switch on our professional selves depending on what we're doing in different circumstances. So I think it's very much a what we feel comfortable with scenario. And we all want to be as authentic as we can be, but only to a level that we're comfortable with.
So you could ask that same question, but how would it be if we all felt comfortable enough to bring ourselves, our authentic selves, to work? It's almost if we were all created that environment where people could make that choice without feeling the shame or the guilt or the uncertainty about how bringing their authentic self will be addressed, then yeah, I think.
So we've got the societal acceptance and inclusion, then we've got institutional acceptance and inclusion, then we've got team acceptance and inclusion, and at the heart of it, we've got self-acceptance and inclusion.
And that's a
Can I
tough
just
one.
can I just mention RSD? I know, right?
Yeah.
Can I just mention RSD, rejection
Yeah.
sensitivity dysphoria? I mentioned it at the beginning. Some people say rejection sensitive dysphoria. I say rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Hannah says, how should feedback be delivered to someone with RSD? That is a brilliant question. And what I would say is it's helpful if there's no judgment. The one thing, well, there's many things that people struggle with. One of the things that people struggle with is the idea that they're being judged. And to be in an environment where there is no judgment is like heaven, really. Because often people are judging themselves, back to the whole shame thing that we talked about earlier. So if the feedback can happen in a way that is non-judgmental and isn't about kind of you as a person and who you are and your faults and all the things you can't do and the shame that you feel, but it's about, say, the work, not even about what's gone wrong, but what's gone right, how can we make it better, those kinds of approaches. I even get scared about the word feedback. So if there are ways that we can work with somebody that doesn't even involve using the word critical friend or feedback or, review or something like that, even better, because you turn it then into something else. You turn it into part of the creativity, as opposed to it being a kind of almost formal or a step of a process. I hope that helps.
Hannah has put into the chat that her husband says he feels physical pain from RSD.
Yes.
I totally get that. Someone said, what on the face of it is not a criticism, it's like a mild like criticism maybe. And it's felt like they have just slapped me in the face, like the physical. I don't actually go like that, but it's like, yeah. Or if something's really bad, it can feel like someone's just like stabbed you in the heart. That's how I feel. It's like it's physical. It really, yeah.
That's how I describe it as well. It's like being stabbed in the heart, and it can have ramifications over years. I once presented a workshop, and I always get good reviews for my workshops. And somebody put on a feedback form. Somebody put on a feedback form. The presenter was biased. Now that happened about 10 years ago, and it's and I don't even know what they meant by that. It may not have even been a criticism, but I still remember it sometimes. And it's the kind of thing you might wake up at 3 a.m. ruminating about. And that's what RSD does to people.
Okay, I'm going to follow on from one of the questions, which had asked about giving feedback to someone who feels RSD. So how do you think people can support us individuals with ADHD? How can we manage those feelings of overwhelm if we're faced with large projects at work or complex assignments in study? How would you suggest like a teacher or an educator or a manager could support those people who are facing those things?
Okay, so there are lots of things that you can do to support colleagues. Things like, first and foremost, before you do anything else, ask them lots of questions. Don't make any assumptions about how they work, how they feel, or what's best for them. Ask them lots of questions, ask them lots of open questions. So that's one of the ways in which coaching questions can come in really useful. So if you're not familiar with coaching questions, have a look at a few examples of the kinds of questions. What's worked for you before? what went well, what might you change, you know, who might you be able to get some help from. Those kinds of questions can be incredibly useful. A lot of people with ADHD struggle to start things. So if you don't have a starting point, you may never get started. And that is a horrible situation to be in, especially in the workplace. So establishing a starting point, small steps. Overwhelm is big. So obviously, if you've got a massive project to do, don't know where to start, panic sets in, anxiety, disaster. So what's the very first thing you're going to do? People with ADHD, I'm generalizing, but a lot of people with ADHD work really well with another person. So a buddy to be able to work with, have meetings with, talk things through, get some, bounce ideas around, get some advice. So buddying up with someone can be incredibly helpful to get you started on a project. And then working out how to break something down into smaller steps. It can absolutely happen with another person. And if I've got a meeting with Laura next week at 10 o'clock to discuss how we're going to start the project will start because the steps are in place to make it happen. If I spend 6 weeks worrying about it, I won't make any progress at all. So regular check-ins, encouragement and support, and knowing that you can communicate and share if you do have any worries, so that it doesn't build up into a giant worry. So small, bite-sized ways of being able to work. There are various bits of technology that can help somebody. Project planning tools. I use Trello, for example, to help me visualize where I am with things. My diary looks like a patchwork quilt because I divide everything up into color-coded sections, which makes me happy. But it makes me feel like I'm on top of it, you know. So feeling like you're on top of it is half the battle. And then there are things like Pomodoro or Flora, where you can set a timer, because if you've really got to focus for a couple of hours, that can be so hard, especially if it's not the most exciting job in the world. So something like Pomodoro, Flora, and absolutely loads of people are doing this lately as well, as body doubling or flow sessions, where you get several people together in an online room or in real life to work together on individual projects for a couple of hours. Just having that other person there will make you do it. It's very strange how it all works. And I think if you set yourself that you have to do this thing for 2 hours, and you tell everyone at the beginning, I'm going to be doing this for the next hour or 2 hours, and then everyone says what they're going to be doing at the end of it, you say, yes, I have done the thing. It may be a dopamine hit, I don't know, but body doubling, all of the things I've just suggested can help break it down into it's an eating the elephant scenario, really.
One that I use is Goblin Tools. It uses AI, and it's really good for, like Esther was saying, I really struggle to just start. I can talk myself, but that doesn't get anything down onto a piece of paper. So it's like really difficult to start writing it down or start getting it onto a system. So I use Goblin Tools, and you put in what your project is, and then it breaks it down into chunks. Now, I often go in and then change all those chunks, but it's chunked it for me, and it gives me this super thing that gives a guesstimate of how long that might take. That's amazing. I just love it. So yeah, Goblin Tools. That's my new favorite one just now.
Brilliant suggestion. Thank you.
Somebody says they use ChatGPT as a buddy. Nice.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Willow's saying having enough information, and context is very important. What the purpose of a meeting or a project is. This reduces anxiety because unknowns are made clear. So yeah, that totally can help. Monica is asking, what over-the-counter medication can help manage ADD better? Working memory, or what daily strategies can help?
Okay, this is a massive. When you say over the counter, I'm going to include diet, exercise, and supplements in that answer. So what works for one person might not work for another. Lots of people take magnesium and lion's mane, or is it lion's bane? It's something with a lion in anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, lion's
mane.
So
there are various supplements that people take. Many a time, because I teach people, a lot of people with ADHD who I teach. A person will come in the room and say, everyone needs to make sure that their diet's good. And then another person might say, that's very triggering for me because I've had a eating disorder and I really struggle with thinking about food as being a way to control my condition. And a lot of people with ADHD also struggle with eating disorders, just so you know that as well in the back of your mind. So there are supplements, and there is diet and exercise. And of course, some people get into a situation where they're over exercising, losing too much weight. Medication can affect people's appetites. So if we're looking at it holistically, I would say if you buy a supplement that helps you, that's fine. But there's no one combination of things that's gonna help everybody. And some of those things might not help, and there might be lots of people who it doesn't help at all. I take magnesium and I have absolutely no idea if it makes a difference or not.
I take really high EHA omega-3, and again, I've got no idea, but I saw a doctor say it was good, and I thought, give me some of that. It's like, it's biohacking at its ultimate, me, and just like trying to take supplements to see if it works. But yeah, I would advocate lion's mane. That helped me. So
I would say that the most beneficial thing you can do is get some counselling for your past, process it, forgive yourself, understand yourself, and get some coaching for your future so that you can understand how you can use your strengths and not be mean to yourself, because you are what you are. And I don't think supplements are going to do, they might make us feel better, and that's great, but no, nothing's ever going to cure ADHD. Even when you take medication, for those of you who don't know, if you take methylphenidate, for example, it will damp down your default mode network, which is pulling you away from your task positive network. That's what methylphenidate does. That's why when people take methylphenidate, their brain goes quiet and they go, well, this has happened to me when I took it for the first time. I was like, whoa, I can see all the colors. It was really weird. But that obviously also doesn't cure ADHD. Nothing does. It just allows you to be able to do what you need to do for yourself for that short amount of time that it's taken effect. And there are various different combinations of various different meds that people take. But I've never heard anyone say, oh, I've taken a supplement, it has the same effect.
Great. Well, the hour has flown. We're at like 23 minutes past 1 already. So if you've got any last burning questions, fire them in the chat quick, people, because we're literally down to the last few minutes. And we've had loads of people just saying how valuable this chat has been, and how much it's helped. There have been people who've had to duck out, but that is their parting comment, that it's been super helpful. So yeah, I think let's have a look and see if there's any.
There's one here that says oh no, it's been answered. Or what is ADHD? Autism and ADHD together. Okay. I don't mind staying a few minutes over if anyone wants to ask me anything that they didn't want to ask me in front of everyone as well. That's also fine. I've got like 15 minutes scheduled in after this is finished.
We've all, Laura's put, how can you explain what, oh, that disappeared, what accommodations when you struggle with occasional burnout? So yeah,
that's a good
what
question.
can you do in terms of burnout if that's causing an issue?
I suppose there's something there, isn't there, about prevention as well as dealing with it when it happens. I had a client who was, burnout can happen in a day or a week or a month or a year or just over years, and then you suddenly burn out. So burnout is quite an interesting one. I had a client who was burning out every week. And so they created a regime for themselves where they would have a crash Friday. And then they would, I always say, I think people should have like a t-shirt with a battery on the front, which is interactive. And then when it's full and green, like our phone batteries, we all know that we can do stuff. But when it's down on the red, we need to go in the dark room or do whatever we need to do to recharge our battery. So preventing burnout is just as important, I think, and finding ways that work for you to prevent your burnout as when it actually happens. So I guess that's quite a long conversation to have over a period of time with the people that you're working with, in terms of, you know, what causes it, how might that be prevented, and what might you do with it once it has happened. I know that doesn't really answer the question, but take a step back. Angela's got your hand up.
Hi, yeah, it was just more an answer to that question. Also, thank you, amazing session. So much to talk about. So I recently went through this, and my HR department were actually very helpful. HR departments usually are, because they're afraid of being sued. So if you're burning out on the job. And my manager wanted me to sign off for, a period of time. And I'm like, that is not going to be helpful to me, because it's just going to increase my stress levels. And I will sit at home ruminating about all the terrible things. I'm actually good when I'm working. I'm just not coping brilliantly at the moment. And they put me on a reduced hours regimen. So 4 hours a day for the first couple of weeks, then 5 hours a day. And it was absolutely brilliant, and it was just what I needed. And then they checked in with me, after a month or so, and, how was I doing afterwards? And that made a really big difference. So that's just something that people might want to try suggesting.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. It's very helpful. We're starting as a community and as the wider neurodivergent community, we're starting to raise awareness in our circles. And of course, a lot of people are being diagnosed within those circles too. So they're helping to raise awareness within HR circles or occupational therapy circles, because neurodivergent people are everywhere. So the more we can, if we feel comfortable, the more we can share and the more we can raise awareness, the more we can get our services to support us in a better way. Laura.
Awesome. Let's see.
I've been
Lots and lots of
scrolling through.
thank yous. There's just loads of thank yous as to you sharing, and people saying that they could maybe do these kind of chats themselves. I know it's a plug in a way, but I've put the community survey. It's still open for the last couple of days. Please, if you've got a suggestion for a future clinic, that is where to put it. I mean, by all means, you can email Kelly and I, but this came about from somebody suggesting and giving us information from the community. If you ask, we will do our best to put these kind of things on. So please, fill that out. If you've got any kind of suggestions at all, we will consider them.
Just to mention as well that there are a few people around in coaching circles in particular who do ADHD or neurodiversity awareness raising sessions. So I work with JISC most of the week, but I also work as a coach and an awareness raising kind of person as well. So there are people out there who can deliver awareness raising workshops within kind of corporate company education environments. I've done them in colleges and things like that, so that staff start to get a feeling for what's actually going on with, particularly they're usually concerned with their learners, but actually their colleagues and sometimes family and friends as well. So just knowing what it is and knowing that it's a lot more complex than is the kind of common guy down the pub type of view of it can be incredibly helpful.
Yeah, I've popped the link to Esther's website into the chat, so please, guys, go and have a look at that. And the blogs on Esther's page also have some of those other resources and links and things that you've asked for. We will share the recording on our YouTube platform, and any pertinent links in the chat and things like that, we'll share those out in the community. Thank you so much, Esther, for coming along and giving us this hour of your time. Just so appreciative that you've done that for us. Yeah, I thank you to all of you for coming along and spending this hour with us, sharing your time with us. Really appreciate that too. And
Karine has put in the chat pane, this session has been like a great big beautiful hug.
Yay! Oh, that makes my day.
That makes me so happy. Thank you.
Consequently, RSD, if you might get a slap in the face, but sometimes people just give you a hug, and that is a hug. So yeah, that's warm and fuzzy all over now. So fantastic. Yeah. Oh,
you're so welcome.
Sessions. Cool. All right then. This has been amazing. Thank you so much to all of you, and you are free to go and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. And we'll catch you next month.
And I'll just stay here for a few minutes afterwards, just in case anyone wants to ask me anything privately.